glorious food, hot sausage and mustard. So after years of loving the musical, I finally read by Charles Dickens, Oliver Twist. And it was so different from the musical. There was so much more plot and in-depth characterization. And it starts out in the Victorian era with Charles Dickens, right in the opening paragraph, saying, "A certain town I will assign no fictitious name. There is one anciently common to most towns, great or small to wit, a workhouse." Universal setting shows that everywhere in England there is this breeding ground of corruption as the workhouse, where orphans and children are forced to lead these miserable lives. And that relates to Dickens' own past of having to work in a shoe factory from a very young age, even though he wanted to be a writer. So there is obviously a tone that is somber and painting and bitter towards the workhouse. Oliver, Oliver, never before has a boy wanted more. The story begins with a young woman giving birth to a boy in a workhouse. They have no clue who she is, where she came from, or even what her social class is, so they just determine the boy to be a poor orphan of the workhouse. When Oliver is at the age of 9, Mr. Bumble, the parochial officer, decides to sell him to Mr. Sowerberry, a coffin maker. Swooned over by the fortunes of London, he decides to trek up there for 7 days and meets the Artful Dodger, a young boy in a waistcoat and a gentleman's top hat. The Artful Dodger takes Oliver to Fagin, who is a thief, and he's also known as the Jew. So Fagin decides to breed Oliver as one of his own. The Artful Dodger and Charles Bates leave behind Oliver when they pickpocket, so Oliver is left to be blamed for being a thief. A witness, Mr. Brownlow, spoke up for Oliver. The kind Mr. Brownlow picks up Oliver off the street, brings him back to his home, and nurses him back to health, and they foster a beautiful son and father relationship. Mr. Brownlow trusts Oliver with £5 and tells him to go to the bookkeeper's, but instead, Oliver is kidnapped by Nancy and Sykes. Miss Maylie and Miss Rose, the residents of the home, are convinced that Oliver was not the thief, and they try to nurse him back to health. They accept Oliver into their family, and they teach and guide him, and they have very happy and peaceful domestic lives. Anything for you. It's time for the spoiler section. So do look away now if you plan on reading this in the future. So it turns out that Oliver has a half-brother named Monks. They share the same father. But Monks decided to cut Oliver out of the will, take the money that was owed to Oliver, and he instead throws Oliver's proof of lineage down the drain. Nancy overhears Monks and tells Miss Rose about it, but then Bill Sykes finds out and decides to kill Nancy, but he is eventually hung. On page 31, Dickens says, "But nature or inheritance had implanted a good sturdy spirit in Oliver's breast, saying that Oliver is a strong child with good morals who can overcome any obstacle." Nancy turns out to be a selfless heroine in this, and for that I really love her character. She has the internal conflict of being devoted to her lover Sykes and Fagin, but they're horrible people. She even says on page 399, "You can do nothing to help me. I am past all hope indeed." She is torn because she is loyal to both of them, yet she wants to save Oliver from this horrible life that they want to put him through. I think Fagin's true sinister side is especially shown when, after capturing Oliver for the second time, he says, instilling into his soul, Oliver's, the poison which he, Fagin, hoped would blacken it and change its hue forever. And that sounds absolutely horrifying and disgusting, and that really forces you to despise Fagin. I admire Dickens because he truly portrayed how London was in the Victorian era, about the poverty of life that a lot of authors would sugarcoat at the time. But he really brought it down even to the illusions, such as Jacob's Island, which was thriving with thieves. An overarching theme that good triumphs over evil is shown through Oliver, whose morals survive even through all the hardships he faces, and the endings of the characters. So the good characters such as Oliver and Miss Rose end up in the countryside living happily, whereas the bad characters such as Sykes and Fagin end up being killed. Ba, 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 everyone